All right, everyone, welcome back to Steel City Sports. So what a chaotic week we had. I can't remember the last time we had this many upsets in just 1 week. And yeah, I did not have a particularly good week when it comes to my picks. In week one, I went 12-4, pretty solid. This week, I went 8-8. And I think a lot of people had a rough time. The sports books definitely cleaned up with all these underdogs winning. I can't imagine how many parlays were crushed by all this. So we're going to talk about all this now. I'm going to be reviewing every game from week one. So let's get right on into it with the Thursday night game, the Bills at Dolphins. So I took Miami here. And my biggest gripe with the Bills this offseason was they basically got rid of everyone important in their secondary. Both their starting safeties from the past couple of years, Hyde and Poyer, gone. And Trey White, whenever he was healthy, was their best corner. So they got rid of all three of those guys. I was like, how's this secondary going to be able to stop anyone? Well, I guess I overrated those losses because Tua Tagovailoa completely shit his pants in this game. Tua had a meltdown before he got injured, throwing 3 interceptions, including a pick six. And completely embarrassing me. I mean, because I was heavy on the Dolphins here, and they just came out and gave one of the most pathetic performances. I think Tua had legitimately the worst game in his NFL career. As for his injury, it's heartbreaking. You know, my heart dropped when it happened. Just knowing his history, seeing him doing the fencing motion, you hate to see that. But knowing Tua, I don't think there's any chance he retires. Knowing the competitor he is, knowing the money that's on the table. You can argue if that's the wrong move or not, but at the end of the day, it's Tua's call, and I think he's going to keep playing football. I'd be surprised if he retires. But as for this game, this was an absolute beatdown, and I think the real X factor for the Bills is James Cook. He has completely changed this team, where Josh Allen, yeah, he's still capable of being Superman anytime he wants, but he doesn't have to be anymore because they've really developed a legit run game, something they haven't had in years past. So yeah, you lost Stephon Diggs, that elite vertical threat for Allen to throw to, but now you unlocked an element of this offense that really wasn't there for most of Josh Allen's prime, and that was the development of James Cook, who went off in this game, having his best game in the NFL. And on top of that, the Bills' O-line, this is the best their O-line has looked, I think, in the Josh Allen era. I mean, Allen had like an hour to throw every time. Like, they were really holding up well against that Dolphins pass rush, and the Dolphins are just in shambles right now. Even if Tua was healthy, I'd still have a lot of concerns, but with him gone, they're kind of a mess because any game you play with Skylar Thompson at the helm, I mean, barring you're playing like Carolina, you're probably going to lose that game. So I'll be interested to see if Miami signed someone. It said they were looking around, maybe like Tannehill. That'd be kind of cool to see a reunion there with Miami. And I think a lot of like backup level quarterbacks that are just kind of out on the free agent market, you can make them look good because McDaniel is running that Shanahan-style offense, which we're going to talk about here in a second with the Saints game. But quarterbacks in that Shanahan philosophy-type offense usually thrive. So if you put Ryan Tannehill in this offense with those weapons, I'm not saying they're going to be like a Super Bowl team, obviously, or even make the playoffs, but they'll at least be competitive. It's definitely an upgrade over Skylar Thomas, so interested to see what both teams going forward. But it's clear I was wrong about the Bills. Their Super Bowl window is absolutely still open. I think I kind of just overrated their departures this offseason. So let's get into the Sunday slate of games. Starting off with Saints-Cowboys, this was probably the biggest upset of the week. Not just because the Saints won, it's the fashion in which they did it. They absolutely came out and just punched the fucking teeth out of the Dallas Cowboys. This was a shameful, pathetic performance for the Cowboys. It really was. This game was done by halftime. Dak had a bad game. Their run game is non-existent, and I feel very validated here because all last year I told you they were fool's gold. They can't beat a real team. What happened? They lost in the playoffs. This year I told you they're the most overrated defense in the NFL. I had a Cowboys fan chirping at me about that. Well, look what happened. You got your head caved in by Derek Carr. So, yeah, as impressive as this is for the Saints, at the end of the day, you beat the Panthers. Okay, you killed the Panthers. Okay, I think if you, the person listening to this video, if you and me suited up, we could probably beat the Carolina Panthers. So I don't know about that. And then beating the Cowboys, I don't know how impressive that is either because it's the Cowboys. They're always shitting their pants in big games. So even though I picked the Cowboys here because I thought, you know, I don't think anyone saw this coming from the Saints. So I'm really excited to see what's going to happen with the Saints going forward. That NFC South race is really heating up. It kind of reminds me of a couple years ago when everyone just assumed the NFC East was going to be terrible, and then the Eagles and the Cowboys were good, and that even the Giants were scrappy. That's kind of like what we have in this season with the NFC South, with Atlanta, with Tampa, with New Orleans. Right now, New Orleans looks like they're the front runner in the NFC South. But yeah, I did get this one wrong. Puts my record at 0-2 for the week. Next game we had, I think this was, from a spread perspective, this was the worst upset of the week. That was the Raiders at Ravens, because I think the Ravens were favored by 8 points, and they lost this game at home. And if you listen to my prediction video, I said if the Ravens lose this game, it's time to hit the panic button. And yeah, they lost the game at home. Wow, this is the most embarrassing loss of the season thus far. I mean, it's absolutely unacceptable for you to lose to the Las Vegas Raiders at home. The Las Vegas Raiders have a bottom 10 roster in the NFL, and the Ravens were just in the AFC Championship game last year. You have the reigning MVP. You have superstars all over this team, and you lost to a team with a backup quarterback, Gardner Minshew, playing. Gardner Minshew went out there and carved you up. That's absolutely unacceptable. So, yeah, I'm officially hitting the panic button here with the Ravens, because there's a couple big things that stand out to me with the Ravens. Number one, I don't know if Todd Monken knows what the fuck he's doing. Obviously had a lot of success last year, but I think that was more thanks to Lamar, because whenever they had to rely on the scheme of Todd Monken in the AFC Championship game, they completely embarrassed themselves and they lost the game. And his game plan through the first two games has looked shameful. It's looked embarrassing. It's kind of like, hey, Lamar, just go out there and pull a play out of your ass, and we're going to rely on that. And this is the worst the O-line has looked in the Lamar era. Lamar has become accustomed to playing behind really good to elite-level offensive lines, and this is definitely the worst the O-line has looked. Derrick Henry, I don't know. I mean, Derrick Henry had a fine game here. He had a touchdown. They used him a little more, but I don't know. That still seems kind of weird to me. That fit is nowhere near as seamless as I thought it would be. I think there's real question marks with the Ravens right now, especially with them being last place in their division, and they're going on to play the Cowboys. That's going to be a fun matchup, but yeah, another one I got wrong here with a big upset, so that puts my record at 0-3, and yeah, I'm not buying any stock in the Raiders winning here. You got a fluky win, good for them. I still think they're going to suck as this year goes on. Next, we have Giants at Commanders, and if you listen to my prediction video, I said this was probably going to be a 3-point game, and it turned out to be exactly that. I predicted 13-10 Washington. It turned out to be 21-18 Washington. We don't need to spend much time on this game. I don't think a lot of people watch this one, and for good reason. Daniel Jones is just terrible. Although, in this game, he wasn't objectively, awful, but still on one of the worst contracts in the league right now. Washington gets a good win at home at 21-18. So that puts my record at 1-3 for the week. We'll get my first win finally. Next up, we have Chargers at Panthers. And, of course, I took the Chargers here, and they went in there and fucking steamrolled the Carolina Panthers 26-3. And we now just got the report yesterday that Bryce Young has been officially benched for Andy Dalton. So I think it's safe to assume Bryce Young probably, he might get another chance as a starter just because he was a number one overall pick. And I don't think Andy Dalton's going to go in there and light it up as the starter, but I'm ready to pound the gavel. I think last week I said I'm 99% ready to pound the gavel on Bryce Young. I'm 100%. He's done. He's not going to work out. He's too small. He's too limited. He's not a great athlete. It's a shame because I really liked him at Bama. But I think myself and a lot of people just overlooked his flaws because he was so exciting in college. But that size is just not a winning recipe, especially when you have no special attributes to you. Like Kyler Murray, he's a small guy, but he has an incredible deep ball. He's an elite athlete. He's really fucking fast. Bryce Young has none of that, and he's smaller than Kyler Murray. So it's a shame. He might get another chance this year, but I'm officially pounding the gavel. Bryce Young is a bust, and I think this is going to go down as one of the worst draft picks in the history of the NFL, because not only did you take a bust number one overall, but on top of that, you traded all this stuff to the Bears. They got some good players and Caleb, and we're going to talk about Caleb later, but they got Caleb and some other good starting players out of that deal. They still owe them a second-round pick this upcoming draft from that trade. And on top of that, the guy picked right after Bryce Young, second overall C.J. Stroud, is now threatening to be a top 3 QB in the league. So, yeah, just a disaster. I really feel bad for Carolina. But that's it is what it is. The Chargers get a good win here. J.K. Dobbins is looking like a stud. He had a great game here. So that puts my record at 2-3 for the week. Here's another big one. I was heavy on the Colts. Colts at Packers. I was big-time heavy on the Colts here because I was like, there's no way Malik Willis is going to be able to win an NFL game. He's just too limited. He doesn't really do anything productive at an NFL level. And I think a lot of people were with me when it comes to the Colts in this game, but Anthony Richardson completely shit his pants and was god-awful in this game, throwing 3 interceptions. And this led me to say, yesterday, maybe I overrated Anthony Richardson because when he initially came to the NFL, I said it's probably going to take time. Like, yeah, he has a lot of attributes, but he's a very raw prospect. He has to work on his accuracy. But then 2023 came around, and he started those first couple games last year. He looked pretty good. So I was like, well, maybe I was just wrong about him. So going into this year, fully healthy, a decent roster around him, at least I thought it was a good roster, I was like, yeah, they're probably going to be a playoff team. Doesn't look like that right now. They're 0-2. Anthony Richardson just had a terrible game. Their defense is really bad. The skill position guys, I think I even overrated them as well. Michael Pittman fucking sucks. He's terrible. I mean, he's done literally nothing the first 2 games. The Colts, they might be in a similar boat with the Ravens in terms of it might be time to hit the panic button with Anthony Richardson looking like that. With you not being able to beat Malik Willis, that is a fucking disgrace on the entire organization. So that puts my record at 2-4 after getting that one wrong. Here's another big upset. That's kind of the theme of the week is the upsets. 49ers at Vikings. I said the 49ers were going to bludgeon the Vikings. I said this was really basically going to be a bloodbath, a slaughtering of the Vikings. Nope, that was wrong. They lost. You got to give a lot of credit to Minnesota. I don't know if this is going to continue to hold on. I don't know if they're going to be this good for the rest of the year. I still don't trust Sam Darnold. He had 2 good games this year. That doesn't erase all the shit he did, the years of tape we have on him in years prior. So I'm still holding off on Sam Darnold, and I'm not buying any Sam Darnold stock right now. I know he's going up. A lot of people are singing his praises right now. I still got to see more. It's been 2 games. People forget those first 4 games at the start of the 2021 season in Carolina, Sam Darnold looked really good. Then Christian McCaffrey got hurt, and the team kind of self-imploded. So I could see something like that happening here in Minnesota. I'm not buying into the hype just yet, but wow, this was an impressive win to beat the 49ers. Even though they're down McCaffrey, look at what they did to the Jets without McCaffrey last week. So very impressive win here for Minnesota. The 49ers, I'm not taking too much away from this. I mean, it's a road loss. These are going to happen. I mean, they have been so unbeatable in the regular season the past couple of years that this is a big surprise, but they'll bounce back from this. I'm not really worried about the Niners at all. The opposite of what I said about like the Ravens, how I'm panicking over them. I ain't worried about the 49ers whatsoever. They'll be fine. So getting that one wrong puts my record at 2-5 for the week. Here's another one I got wrong. Browns at Jags. I'm officially pounding the gavel on the Jags. I was wrong about them. They just suck. I mean, the Jags, they're just not a good football team. When you look at their roster on paper, it's a very lackluster roster, and I think the way that this roster is built is really for Trevor Lawrence to be the man and really carry them, and he's just not that good. I'm not saying Trevor Lawrence is a scrub. He's obviously not like Bryce Young. He's not a bust or anything. He's a good NFL quarterback, but he's not great. He's not elite. He's not good enough to carry his team, a very limited roster. He's not good enough to elevate his team and drag them to the playoffs like we've seen the other elite guys do, like Burrow did, like Justin Herbert did that one year. Even though he had an incredible roster, Trevor Lawrence is just, he's too limited in my opinion, and Doug Peterson's on a hot seat here. I got to say this, and I might throw up after saying this. Deshaun Watson actually looked decent. Yeah, Deshaun Watson, I mean, I think you could probably argue this is his best game in a Cleveland Browns uniform. which ain't saying much because of how low that bar is. I think he had 178 or something like that, 170 passing yards, no turnovers. I think he had a rushing touchdown. I could be wrong on that, but at least he didn't blow the game. He wasn't the reason they lost. They just relied on their defense. Deshaun didn't make any big mistakes, and they got out of there with a win. If Deshaun plays like that, the Browns could probably win 10 games, but I don't see Deshaun playing like that. I see Deshaun for the disaster that he is, and when your best game with your team, when you've played like 13 games with them, I think he's played even more. I can't remember the exact number of games Deshaun's played there, but the entire tenure of your career with the Browns, your best game is 170 passing yards and no picks. Wow. What a high bar. Yeah, I still don't trust Deshaun. I still don't trust the Browns. They beat up on a Jags team that I think I really overrated. The Jags look more like a 6-win team than they do a 9-win team. They've got a lot of problems, and I could kind of see them blowing up this offseason with Doug Peterson getting fired. Even the GM could get fired. Just a very limited roster. It's crazy, too, because they went 8-3 last year to start off because T-Law did look really hot. But when T-Law really isn't playing like flawless football, the team's kind of doomed. And as we just said, it's kind of silly to rely on Trevor Lawrence to carry your team. He's just too limited. Let's move on now to Seahawks at Patriots. So I did pick Seattle in this one. They did win in overtime, 23-20. That puts my record at 3-6. So the story coming out of this one is Geno Smith. Geno Smith had an incredible game here. He looked like he did a couple years ago when he won Comeback Player of the Year. He had over 300 passing yards. Just really good. Really, really good game from Geno. And if Geno Smith plays like this, the Seahawks will be a playoff team. Absolutely. Because the Seattle team is just super talented. The defense is impressive. Mike McDonald, I like as the coach. There's a lot to like in Seattle when Geno gives you performances like this. They're a really good team. And New England, I will give New England credit. Because if you listen to me this offseason, New England was it was either Dallas or New England in terms of the team that I was most harsh on this offseason. Maybe you could throw the Jets in there. But I shit all over the Patriots this whole offseason, particularly Gerard Mayo. I still don't think they're a very good team. I still don't see them winning more than 4 or 5 games. But they're more scrappy than I thought. They're more competitive than what I thought they'd be. I thought they'd be a total abject dumpster fire, and they're clearly not that. They are a competitive team. They got some good players. So I will, I'm not going to fully say I was wrong about the Patriots because I still think they're bad, but I'll give them some credit. They are a scrappy team. And they almost won this because it did go to overtime. Next up, we have Jets at Titans. So I did have the Jets here. They did win 24-17. That puts my record at 4-6 for the week. Will Levis is done. I was wrong about Will Levis. Now, I didn't think Will Levis was going to be a superstar or anything, but when I just looked at what they put around Will Levis, I was like, well, he had a pretty good first game. I think he has some talent there. I liked his deep ball ability, like his deep arm accuracy, his ability there. He's terrible. He's flat out terrible. He's just not an NFL player. He has some of the worst moments of this young season. When you look at week 1, when he throws that pick and gets on his knees, it's like holding his face crying. That kills me every time I see that picture from when they lost to the Bears week 1. And then this week, he had equally as bad a moment where he did that shuffle pass where he's like adjacent to the ground. He's parallel with the ground, like jumping in midair, trying to shuffle the ball, and it leads to a turnover. Just an unmitigated disaster. And I could see very, very quickly within the next week or two, Will Levis getting benched for my boy Mason Rudolph, who would be an absolute upgrade over him and would make this team a lot more competitive. And the Jets, they get a nice win here. Even though we just talked all that shit about Will Levis, the Titans have a legit defense. Their defense is good. And it sucks because they probably should be 2-0 right now because of their defense. But Will Levis is that bad that he just gave both those games away. So like I said, I think he will be benched very soon, if not this week, honestly. So let's move on now to the Bucs at Lions, playoff rematch from last year. So yeah, I did have the Lions here. They lost. So Tampa, we got to start taking Tampa serious now. And I cannot wait. I can't believe I'm saying this, but I can't wait to see the first time the Saints and the Bucs play because I really think the division's going to come down to those two teams. They look really good right now. Baker Mayfield is, I think you have to put him in the MVP conversation based off of what he's done these first 2 weeks. And then the Lions, they look nowhere near as unbeatable as they did last year. I don't know exactly what changed, but their game plan in this game particularly was not great. Having Jared Goff he had 55 throw attempts. Just to compare that, Baker had 19 throw attempts. So I don't know why they were trying to get Goff to carry them whenever you have the best running back tandem and O-line in the league. Just lean on that. I think if they would have just fed the running backs more, they would have probably won this game. But they asked Jared Goff to do too much in this situation. I think Tampa's defense is really good, holding the Lions to, just 16 points whenever last year. This was one of the most potent offenses in the league. And Tampa's defense went into Detroit and held them to just 16. You got to give Todd Bowles and that defense a lot of credit. This just continues to prove Todd Bowles is legitimately one of the most impressive defensive minds in football right now. And with Belichick gone, you could argue he is the premier defensive mind in football right now. And he's proven that this year. To go with Baker and the offense looking really good. Tampa's a real team. Tampa could legitimately be like a 12-win team if they continue to play like this. But like I said, I got that wrong. That puts me at 4-7. Here's one that I'm so happy about, and I don't even care if I went 8-8. I'm just glad that I finally nailed this pick, and that was the Cardinals, because I have been defending Kyler on this channel ever since I started this channel 2 years ago. I've been the biggest Kyler supporter. He's my favorite non-Steeler player, and I finally feel vindicated. Everyone fucking forgot about Kyler Murray and how good he was. I don't get it. People just got this amnesia with Kyler Murray and forgot how good he was and started disrespecting him. Oh, they're going to trade him, all this bullshit. When he had DeAndre Hopkins, he was widely considered a top 10 quarterback in the NFL. I'm talking 2020, 2021. He got the fucking Cardinals, a bad franchise, to the playoffs in 2021. People just kind of forget that happened because the contract negotiations got weird. Yeah, I'm going to be obnoxious about Kyler because it's one of the few things that I actually have gotten right. Kyler Murray, everyone's like, oh, whoa, well, I forgot about Kyler. I didn't. I never forgot about Kyler, and I'm going to be obnoxious about him this whole year because he finally gave him a weapon again. That's what the problem with Kyler was, he got hurt, but he didn't have a number one option to go to like when he had DeAndre Hopkins. That's when he was at his best. Now you give him a legit guy with Marvin Harrison Jr., that's going to be one of the most lethal combinations in the NFL going forward. And the Arizona Cardinals came out and fucking axed the Rams 41-10. Finally, my Cardinals pick paid off. I picked them to beat the Bills week 1. That didn't work out. Finally, my Cardinals pick works out. They beat the Rams. And I know the Rams are depleted. I'm probably going to make a separate video about the Rams because there's a lot to talk about with the Rams in terms of their injuries. They're 0-2 right now. And with how the NFC's looking, the Rams might miss playoffs this year. Kind of crazy because how high me and a lot of people were on the Rams going into this year, but due to the decimation of injuries they've had and getting off to a terrible start, I could see them as easily missing the playoffs this year. And maybe Arizona sneak into the playoffs again. We'll see. But that puts my record at 5-7. Next up, we got my Steelers. Of course, I picked them to beat the Broncos. They won in a very ugly game. It felt like every other play was a flag in this game. This was a nasty game to watch. If you're not a fan of the Broncos or the Steelers, I don't know how you got through this one because it was rough to watch. But the Steelers did pull it out. We finally got our first touchdown of the year, Justin Fields to Darnell Washington. This is typical Steelers football. This is how we have to win games, is keep the score low, beat the shit out of the opposing team, and just kind of hope and pray the offense can figure something out. I'm really scared of when we play a real team. We play the Chargers this week. I think it's going to be a bit of a wake-up call because now we're going to be playing an actual offense, unlike Atlanta. We're going to talk about Atlanta, but it was Kirk's first game back off the injury in a new system, all that. I can kind of see why that was weird. Plus, Arthur Smith knows everything Atlanta's trying to do. Arthur Smith knows all their players, so we kind of had an advantage there. And then with Denver, Bo Nix is fucking terrible. I don't know what the fuck people were smoking when they thought Bo Nix was going to come in and just light it up. There were real, legit, respectable people in the media that picked Denver to be a fucking playoff team this year. Just think about that. I mean, that is... How can you, in 2024, look at stuff that happens in the preseason and legitimately take away anything from it? Bo Nix lit it up in the preseason. Whoop-de-fucking-do. He sucks. The Broncos suck. They're just a bad team. They're a really, 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 really bad team. So that puts my record at 6-7. Next up, we had that controversial Bengals-Chiefs game. And, of course, I did pick the Chiefs. And like I said in my predictions video, I don't see me ever picking against the Chiefs this year. They did have a devastating injury in this one, though, to Isaiah Pacheco, who I think they said is going to be out 6 weeks. That definitely sucks because Pacheco was really, you could argue, the second most important piece of this offense outside of Mahomes. I mean, he was really developing as that good of a player. We'll talk about that when I do my Week 3 picks and all that. We can talk more about that. But in terms of this specific game, for most of this game, looked like the Bengals were the better team. I don't know what it is about the Bengals, but they always seem to just play up when they go against the Chiefs. Burrow was really good in this one. I think Burrow outplayed Mahomes in this one. Even though the Chiefs won, Burrow was really good in this. Burrow kind of showed that, yeah, he still is that good. Everyone wants to talk about how the way this game ended with that pass interference call. The dude hitting Rashee Rice. I don't know. I mean, the last time that I criticized the refs for giving the Chiefs a favorable call, I get called a fucking Chiefs hater. So I don't know. The Chiefs fans are getting a little wild with that stuff. Like, I was all on board with the Chiefs last year. I picked them to win every playoff game they were in, and yet somehow I'm labeled the fucking Chiefs hater. I don't get it. You can't tell me that was a bad call. I mean, it was just bad, especially to end a game on that. That's just god-awful, especially whenever you look earlier in this game where basically the same thing was going on for the Bengals. Like, they were letting them play. You know, especially you look at the Jamar Chase, when he got all pissed off, they didn't give him a flag there. So then to turn around and end the game off where the refs bail them out, it doesn't look good for the product. It doesn't look good for the league. Yeah, I couldn't imagine being a Bengals fan and losing in that fashion. That's an absolute heartbreaker, but it's the Chiefs. Like I said, you should never, ever, ever pick against or put money against the Chiefs because it's the Chiefs. Whether there's a will or way, they will find a way to win the football game. So they win there 26-25 in a fun game, just a bad ending. 7-7 is my record now. Then we have the Sunday night game. Bears at Texans. I did pick the Texans in here, so for the first time of this video, I actually have a positive record at 8-7. And Caleb. I think we've just been spoiled for so long of like these great rookie quarterbacks coming in and lighting up, especially last year with C.J. Stroud having the best rookie season in the history of the NFL, leading his team to the playoffs. It led to all this hype for Caleb. He's not ready to do that. He's not ready to lead his team to the playoffs. He clearly needs a lot of development. The style he played at USC is not really, unless you're like literally Patrick Mahomes, that style is not going to translate well to the NFL. And that is just running around, making plays out of nowhere. You know, it takes a very special athlete and quarterback to do that. And Caleb Williams is just not... He's not talented enough at this point in time. He doesn't have the poise of a veteran just yet. And this roster definitely has clear flaws. This O-line is still really, really bad. Caleb Williams got sacked 7 times in this game by that Houston defense. He was running for his life. He got no support from his run game. DeAndre Swift did nothing in this game. So, you know, you can blame Caleb all you want, and he definitely deserves his share of the blame. But the Bears, I think, a lot of people, myself included, kind of overrated their offense, particularly that line. That line is still really, really bad. The run game did nothing in this game. I'll have to do a separate video just talking about Caleb because I still have a lot to say about him, but you got to give props to Houston here. They look legit. And like I said earlier, I think CJ has really entered the conversation as top 3 quarterback in the NFL. I really think he's that good. He's someone I'm actually thinking about putting money on for MVP this year because when you look back at the history of the NFL, at least over like the past 5-6 years, the MVP is typically the quarterback on one of the 1-seeded teams. And I think Houston's going to be the 1 seed in the AFC. They look that dominant. That they're just so talented. I mean, they're like unfairly talented. This is like literally a super team in terms of the talent that they have. And they have a top 3 potential quarterback with C.J. Stroud. I mean, he is like perfect. He's the perfect player. I'm not trying to like suck him off or anything, but when you watch how he just effortlessly gets out of the pocket and extends these plays, it is kind of Mahomes-esque. I mean, it's crazy. He's only in year 2. No one really saw him as this great prospect coming out of Ohio State, and how quickly he's become this good. My number one problem, though, my number one area of concern for Houston, though, would be similar to what we said about the Bears, is their O-line. Their O-line's pretty rough as well. I mean, the Bears were putting a lot of pressure on CJ, but he was able to get out of the pocket and still make these great plays. So Houston, they continue to roll. Like I said, that puts my picks at 8-7 for the week. And then we have last night's game. The Falcons going up to Philly to play the Eagles. And, of course, I picked the Eagles in this one. And for 99% of this game, looked like that pick was right. It all came down to Saquon Barkley. We got to talk about Saquon Barkley because that is absolutely unacceptable for a superstar. To have that happen basically blew the game for them. And I know it's a team sport. There's 11 people on your team on the field at a time. But we're literally talking about like a wide open layup here. I mean, his hands are on the ball. All he has to do is catch it, and it's a first down, and it could have potentially even been a touchdown, and it would have just sealed this game off. That's unacceptable right there from Saquon, and even he acknowledged that. He took the blame for that. Hopefully he'll improve from that. But also the defense for Philly completely embarrassed themselves. The way that it was like a hot knife through butter with Atlanta's march down offense to end off that game. What the fuck was that Philly defense? I mean, it kind of comes back to what we talked about last year with their secondary concerns. Even though I really like Quinyon Mitchell, he's only just a rookie. Their secondary is still very thin, and their secondary got carved apart by Kirk Cousins in this Falcons offense. And, of course, they get that game winner to Drake London. We have the picture on screen of him celebrating for a reason because it's one of the most shocking upsets I've ever seen. Because, like I said, 99% of this game, it looked like the Eagles were going to win. They give the ball back to Atlanta with like a minute 40 or a minute 30. I can't remember exactly how much time, but around there. And they just effortlessly march down the field, get a touchdown, and then Jalen Hurts throws the game-sealing interception to Jesse Bates. And that was that. I'm not going to panic about the Eagles just yet. They do have some problems. I do think Jalen played a lot better in this game than he did in the Brazil game, even though he didn't light it up. But he was playing more in that style of 2022 when he was the runner-up for MVP because he was running a lot more. That's what made Jalen so dynamic. Felt like last year that kind of went away, and he tried to be more of like just a straight-up pocket passer. But he was running around a lot more in this one. He had over 80 rushing yards, so I think that's really good. Jalen needs to lean more into that. He needs to lean more into like the dual threat ability. That's what makes him such a really good QB. And of course, another big thing, they were missing A.J. Brown big time. I don't know what the timetable is for his return, but he was really, really sorely missed in this one. Devontae Smith didn't do a lot. He did have a touchdown, but the overall game, Devontae Smith did not do a lot. Saquon didn't do a lot. So pretty disappointing loss here for Philly. And Atlanta, give them a ton of credit because looked like they were going to blow this game, or they were losing this game for a majority of the game, and then they drive down there, give Kirk a ton of credit. I was really harsh on Kirk after him losing in week 1 to my Steelers. I didn't quite say he was washed, but I was kind of implying that, and he beat the washed allegations with how he won that game at the end. I mean, that was absolutely insane. So that's enough rambling for one day. That has been it for my week 2 recap. Definitely let me know down in the comments your reaction to some of these games. Did your team win this week? How did your picks do? If you made it this far, really appreciate you listening to me. Please go ahead and like and subscribe.